The sky above Stormwind tore open like parchment set aflame. A rift of impossible crimson light split reality itself, bleeding energies that made the city's mages clutch their heads in agony. The arcane sensors throughout the cathedral district screamed warnings. Priests fell to their knees, their prayers to the light interrupted by the overwhelming wrongness of the phenomenon above. From the ramparts of Stormwind Keep, King Anduin Wrynn watched as something fell from that cosmic wound, trailing fire and distortion through the clouds. Not a meteor, not a dragon, something else entirely. Alert the 7th Legion. Anduin commanded, his voice steady despite the dread pooling in his stomach. Mobilize the city guard and get the civilians to the shelters. Gen Greymane, the grizzled worgen at his side, growled low in his throat. That's no Legion portal. The fel energies are wrong. It's something we've never encountered. The object slowed its descent as it approached the city, demonstrating control, intelligence. Anduin's grip tightened on the hilt of Charlemagne as the figure resolved before them. A man, impossibly hovering without magic they could detect, without visible wings or mechanical apparatus. Broad-shouldered, clad in blue and red, with a symbol upon his chest that resembled no kingdom's heraldry Anduin had ever witnessed. The stranger's cape billowed behind him despite the absence of wind, and his eyes glowed with an inner light that was neither arcane nor holy. Your world is in danger. The figure spoke, his voice carrying clearly across the distance without magical amplification. I am Kal-El. I've come to help. As if answering his declaration, a massive roar shook the very foundations of the city. From the east, beyond Elwyn Forest, a pillar of green flame erupted into the sky. Fel energy. The demonic signature was unmistakable. Within the keep's war room, tactical displays flickered to life. Scrying orbs showed the source of the disturbance. A Legion invasion force had opened a massive portal in Deadwind Pass. Demons poured through by the thousands. Infernals, Doom Guards, Pit Lords leading battalions of Fel Guards toward the human kingdoms. Estimated casualties if they reached the city? Anduin asked, his young face hardening with the weight of command. Matthias Shaw, master of SI-7, materialized from the shadows. Conservative estimate places civilian casualties in the hundreds of thousands, Your Majesty. Stormwind's defenses are strong, but this is a Legion vanguard. They're testing our response time. The main force will follow once they've assessed our strength. And our mysterious visitor? Jen asked, his yellow eyes fixed on the hovering figure beyond the windows. Before anyone could respond, the scrying orbs showed movement that defied comprehension. The blue and red figure accelerated to impossible speeds, becoming a blur that crossed the distance to Deadwind Pass in seconds. What followed was carnage on a scale that left even the veteran commanders speechless. The stranger tore through the demon ranks like an avatar of pure destruction. His fists detonated infernals before they could land. Beams of intense heat erupted from his eyes, searing through fel barriers and reducing Doom Guards to ash. A Pit Lord, 20 feet of muscle and rage, swung its massive axe. The blade shattered against the stranger's chest like glass. By the light, Anduin breathed, watching as the single figure accomplished what would have required 3 Alliance battalions and significant casualties. Within minutes, the invasion force was broken. The portal collapsed. Fel fire burned across Deadwind Pass, but it consumed only demon corpses. Not a single human settlement had been touched. The figure returned to Stormwind, landing with impossible grace upon the marble courtyard before the keep. Up close, Anduin could see the stranger was humanoid, but clearly not human. Too perfect, too powerful. In a world where such divergence often spelled deception or corruption, caution was paramount. What manner of being are you? Anduin demanded, his hand resting on Charlemagne's hilt. Mages surrounded the courtyard, their staffs charged with offensive magic. Sharpshooters positioned on the ramparts aimed rifles. Speak truthfully, for we have seen too many false saviors. The stranger's expression softened slightly, showing something that seemed like understanding. I am Kal-El, last son of Krypton. My world died when I was an infant. I was sent away and grew to adulthood on another Earth. where I used my abilities to protect the innocent. I don't fully understand how I came to be here, but I know my purpose remains the same. To stand against darkness, to protect life. To protect life, Gen stepped forward, his bestial features twisted with suspicion. On our world, power like yours comes from one of several sources. The light, the void, arcane magic, fel-corruption, death, nature. You radiate none of these. What fuels your abilities? Kal-El looked upward, toward the sun breaking through the dissipating clouds. My cells absorb and process solar radiation, converting it into the energy that grants me these abilities. On my Earth, I was extraordinary but not unique. Here, it seems my physiology interacts with your world's energies in ways I'm still learning to understand. Before Anduin could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. A voice that carried the weight of absolute authority, backed by millennia of experience. How convenient, this tale of solar-powered heroism and noble purpose. Too convenient, perhaps. A figure emerged from the shadows at the courtyard's edge. Tall, slender, moving with predatory grace. Prophet Velen, leader of the draenei and one of the wisest beings in Azeroth, stepped into the sunlight. His luminous eyes studied Kal-El with an intensity that seemed to peer beyond physical form into the very essence of his being. I have lived for 25,000 years, Velen continued, his melodious voice tinged with sorrow. I have witnessed the fall of worlds, the corruption of the pure, and the lies of those who would present themselves as saviors. The Burning Legion often employs such tactics, beautiful lies wrapped in heroic deeds. Kal-El met the prophet's gaze steadily. I understand your suspicion. In your position, but people are dying while we debate. I heard screams from the Red Ridge Mountains as I flew here. Something is attacking settlements there. Gnolls, I think, but organized in ways that suggest outside influence. Velen's eyes narrowed. You heard screams from Red Ridge? That is nearly 20 miles distant through mountainous terrain. I can hear heartbeats from miles away when I focus. Kal-El replied. Right now, I can hear approximately 47 people in immediate mortal danger. 3 are children. Every second we spend in this courtyard is a second they don't have. Anduin looked to Velen, then to Gen, reading the conflict in their faces. Finally, he made his decision. Gen, take a squadron of your best Worgen trackers and accompany our visitor to Red Ridge. Observe him. If he truly fights for the innocent, we will reassess. If this is deception, you have my authorization to respond with lethal force. The Worgen Lord grinned, showing far too many teeth. It would be my pleasure, Your Majesty. The flight to Red Ridge was brief but tense. Kal-El carried Gen through the air, while the Worgen squadron followed on swift horses below. The old warrior's claws dug into Kal-El's shoulders hard enough that they should have drawn blood. They didn't. The invulnerability that had protected him on Earth seemed to function here as well, at least against conventional physical force. You move faster than any dragon I've ridden, Gen remarked, his tone carefully neutral. And I've ridden plenty. I'm holding back, actually, Kal-El admitted. I don't know how your body would handle true supersonic speeds without protection. They crested a hill and found the source of the screams. Lakeshire was under siege, but these were no ordinary gnolls. Their eyes glowed with fel green, and their weapons dripped with corrupted energies. Leading them was something worse. A Moarg, a Legion engineer, directing the attack with cold precision. It had transformed the gnolls into expendable shock troops, testing alliance response times and defensive capabilities. Kal-El didn't wait for strategy or planning. He descended like a meteor, landing between the demons and fleeing civilians. The impact cratered the ground and sent the nearest attackers sprawling. His eyes blazed red. Twin beams of concentrated heat swept across the corrupted gnolls, and they fell without suffering, reduced to ash before pain could register. The Moarg roared a challenge in demonic tongue, raising a massive cannon that crackled with fel energy. It fired. The blast should have vaporized anything in its path. Kal-El caught it. The fel energy dissipated against his chest, leaving only scorch marks on his suit. He strode forward, and the demon's confidence evaporated into something approaching fear. "Your legion has no power here," Kal-El stated, grabbing the Moarg's cannon and crushing it to scrap. The demon swung a massive fist. Kal-El caught it, twisted, and threw the creature nearly 100 yards into an empty field. It didn't get up. Jen and his squadron arrived to find the battle already over. The Worgen Lord shifted to his human form, surveying the scene with calculating eyes. Civilians emerged from their homes, staring at their unexpected savior with expressions mixing awe and uncertainty. An elderly woman approached, her weathered face streaked with tears. "Bless you, stranger. Bless you, and the light that sent you." Kal-El knelt to her level, his expression gentle. "The light didn't send me, but I'm glad I could help. Is anyone injured?" "3 wounded, Gen reported, his rangers already tending to the fallen. "No deaths, thanks to your intervention. The Moarg was likely a scout for a larger force. Demons rarely work alone." A commotion at the edge of town drew their attention. A lone rider approached, moving with reckless speed. Not a soldier, but a mage, her violet robes marking her as one of Dalaran's Kirin Tor. She reined her horse to a halt before Gen, her face flushed with urgency and fear. "Lord Greymane, the Kirin Tor has detected massive arcane distortions across Azeroth. Whatever came through that rift above Stormwind has destabilized the planet's magical field. We're receiving reports of spontaneous portal formations, wild magic surges, and worse." She finally looked at Kal-El, her expression hardening. "Is this him? The anomaly?" Kal-El felt something shift in his perception. For the first time since arriving on this world, he truly understood the scope of what his presence might mean. He wasn't just a visitor. He was a cosmic-scale disruption to the fundamental forces that governed this reality. Back in Stormwind, an emergency council convened. Representatives from every alliance nation filled the war room. Dwarves from Ironforge, night elves from Darnassus, draenei from the Exodar, gnomes from Nomerigan, Worgen from Gilneas. Even a Pandaran representative stood among them, his expression thoughtful as he studied Kal-El with eyes that had seen much. The Kirin Tor mage, who introduced herself as Archmage Khadgar's personal apprentice, projected holographic displays showing the magical disruptions spreading across Azeroth. Each point of light represented a reality fracture, a place where the barriers between worlds had grown dangerously thin. "Your arrival," she addressed Kal-El directly, "has created ripples in the fabric of our reality. You are not of this cosmos. Your very existence here is an impossible equation that reality is attempting to solve. Every moment you remain, the instability grows." "Then I'll leave," Kal-El said immediately. "I won't put your world at risk." "It's too late for that," Prophet Velen interjected, his ancient voice heavy with resignation. "The damage is done. Your departure now would create an equal and opposite disruption. The rift would simply invert, potentially tearing Azeroth apart from the inside out. No, you are bound to this world now, for better or worse." Anduin leaned forward, his young face showing wisdom beyond his years. "Then we must address the reality we face, not the one we wish we had. Anduin, these disruptions, are they dangerous in themselves, or merely symptoms?" "Both," the apprentice replied. "The thin barriers are allowing things through, things that should remain locked away. We've already had reports of void creatures manifesting in Silverpine Forest, elemental lords forming spontaneously in Tanaris, and something else, something the Bronze Dragonflight is deeply concerned about." A shimmering distortion appeared at the center of the chamber. Reality folded, and a figure stepped through that made even Kal-El pause. A dragon in humanoid form, but radiating temporal power that was fundamentally different from anything he'd encountered before. Chromie, one of the Bronze Dragonflight's most trusted agents, materialized with an expression of profound worry. "We need to talk about your timeline," she said without preamble, looking directly at Kal-El. "You're not supposed to exist," Not in any timeline we've ever observed across infinite possibilities. Your presence here is creating paradoxes that threaten to unravel causality itself. The room fell silent. Even those unfamiliar with the Bronze Dragonflight understood the gravity of a dragon dedicated to protecting time itself, expressing alarm. "Explain," Velen commanded softly. Chromie waved her hand, and temporal images filled the air. Timelines branching, splitting, collapsing back on themselves in impossible configurations. In every observable timeline, Azeroth's fate is determined by the choices made by those native to this cosmos. Mortals, dragons, titans, old gods. The threads are tangled, yes, but they follow patterns we understand. She pointed at Kal-El, and the timelines around him fractured into chaos. He is a thread from an entirely different tapestry. Where he touches our timeline, the patterns break. New futures spawn that should be impossible. Azeroth's destiny is becoming unpredictable. Jen growled softly. Unpredictable can mean opportunity as much as threat, or it can mean extinction. Chromie countered. The Titans shaped Azeroth with specific purposes. The elemental planes exist in careful balance. The light and void wage their eternal conflict according to cosmic laws. Introducing a variable that follows none of these rules? She shook her head. We could be looking at the end of everything. Kal-El felt the weight of dozens of stares. Fear, suspicion, calculation, and beneath it all, a question that he'd faced countless times in his own reality. What do you do with power that doesn't fit the rules? Then help me understand your rules, he said, his voice calm but firm. I've spent my entire life learning to control abilities that could accidentally destroy everything I care about. If my presence here is dangerous, teach me how to minimize that danger. I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. I'm offering to earn that trust through action and restraint. Anduin stood, silencing the murmurs that had begun. We will convene a summit. Representatives from the Horde must be included as well. This affects all of Azeroth, not merely the Alliance. In the meantime, he looked at Kal-El directly. You will remain in Stormwind under observation, not as a prisoner, but as a guest whose movements must be monitored for the safety of all. Kal-El nodded slowly. I understand, but if people need help, if lives are in danger, I won't stand idle regardless of diplomatic concerns. Then we will make certain you are properly directed toward threats that need addressing. Anduin replied, a slight smile touching his lips. I suspect there will be no shortage of those. The summit was held 3 days later in neutral territory. The Dalaran mages transported their floating city to hover above the maelstrom, equidistant from Alliance and Horde territories. The Great Chamber was divided clearly. Alliance representatives on one side, Horde on the other, with neutral factions occupying the center. War Chief Sylvanas Windrunner arrived with her champion and an honor guard of Dark Rangers. The Banshee Queen's crimson eyes fixed on Kal-El with predatory interest. So this is the anomaly that has the Alliance so concerned. She circled him slowly, her movements graceful and threatening. He looks unremarkable for something that threatens reality itself. Lady Sylvanas, Anduin began diplomatically, but she raised a hand to silence him. I have witnessed the end of my own life and returned. I have made pacts with entities that would drive mortals mad. I have seen the other side of death and found it wanting. She stopped directly before Kal-El, studying him with unblinking intensity. You claim to be a hero, but I wonder, do you have any concept of what heroism costs in this world? I'm beginning to understand, Kal-El replied evenly. On my Earth, heroism meant standing between the innocent and those who would harm them. It meant using power responsibly. It meant believing people could be better than their worst impulses. How naive. Sylvanas's laugh was cold and bitter. Let me educate you about this world. Alien. Heroism here means sacrifice. It means watching everyone you love die while you continue forward because the alternative is extinction. It means making choices between terrible options and living with the consequences. Before Kal-El could respond, the chamber shook. Alarms rang throughout Dalaran. Khadgar, the archmage who had been coordinating the summit, burst into the room with panic etched across his usually composed features. We have a catastrophic situation. The distortions have created a massive rift over Icecrown Citadel. Something is coming through. Something that registers as both void and death energy on a scale we've never measured. The scrying orbs activated, showing the frozen wastes of Northrend. Above the spires of Icecrown, a tear in reality vomited forth tentacles of pure void energy. They writhed against the sky, each one miles long, dripping with essence that corrupted everything it touched. Where the void essence landed, death energy surged in response. The two forces interacted catastrophically, creating zones of absolute annihilation. The Lich King. Sylvanas whispered, her expression showing something that might have been fear. If those energies reach his throne, if they interact with the helm of domination, the scourge would become unstoppable. Velen finished grimly. Millions of undead infused with void corruption. It would spread across Azeroth like a plague. Kal-El was already moving toward the balcony. How fast can I get there? Northrend is thousands of miles north, Khadgar stated. Even by dragon, it's hours of flight through dangerous territory. Then I'll fly faster. Kal-El launched himself from the balcony, his cape snapping behind him as he accelerated. The sonic boom rattled Dalaran's shields. He crossed the distance in minutes, pushing his speed to limits he'd rarely tested. The frozen landscape blurred beneath him. He could feel something in the void energies ahead, a hunger that was fundamentally wrong. This wasn't like the demons he'd fought. This was something older, more patient, infinitely more alien. The tentacles sensed his approach. They turned with terrible grace, moving with impossible speed for something so massive. One struck at him like a whip. Kal-El dodged, but barely. The tip caught his shoulder, and pain exploded through his body. Real pain. His costume tore where the void energy touched, and beneath, his invulnerable skin showed a wound. He stared at the injury in shock. On his Earth, nothing conventional could harm him. Nuclear explosions merely annoyed him. Here, something in the void's nature bypassed his defenses entirely. The wound burned with cold fire, and he could feel something trying to seep into him through the breach. Whispers in his mind, promises of power, visions of a universe, remade in perfect emptiness. Kal-El gritted his teeth and forced himself to focus. His heat vision lanced out, striking the nearest tentacle. The void energy recoiled from the solar radiation, but didn't dissipate. It adapted. The next tentacle that struck at him was wreathed in protective essence that diminished his heat vision's effectiveness. He needed a new approach. Flying higher, he positioned himself above the rift itself. The tear in reality was expanding, pulling more void entities through with each passing moment. He could see things in that darkness beyond. Old gods. That's what the briefings had called them. Ancient entities of pure void that had corrupted Azeroth long before mortal races arose. If he couldn't destroy the tentacles, maybe he could close the rift. Kal-El inhaled deeply, his Kryptonian lungs expanding far beyond human capacity. Then, he exhaled. Freeze breath cascaded from his mouth, supernatural cold that could freeze oceans. The rift's edges began to crystallize, reality itself freezing in place. The void entities shrieked soundlessly. The tentacles thrashed with increasing desperation. But the rift was closing, inch by inch. Kal-El poured every ounce of his concentration into maintaining the freeze breath. Even as more tentacles battered against him, each impact sent void energy into his system. The wound on his shoulder spread, black veins crawling across his skin. With a final surge of effort, the rift sealed. The tentacles, cut off from their source, writhed briefly before dissolving into harmless essence that dissipated on the Arctic winds. Kal-El dropped to one knee on the frozen ground, breathing hard. He'd won, but the cost was becoming apparent. The void corruption was spreading. He could feel it worming through his cells, trying to rewrite his very nature. Whispers intensified in his mind, showing him visions of a better way. Why limit himself to heroism? Why not take control? He could rule this world, bring order through strength, The mortals would thank him eventually. No. He forced the thoughts away, focusing on the symbol on his chest. Hope. That's what it meant. Not domination. Not control. Hope that people could save themselves if given the chance. Hope that light would prevail over darkness. He tried to fly back to Dalaran, but found his coordination compromised. He made it halfway before crashing into a snowy mountainside, carving a trench through ice and rock. When he finally stopped, he could barely move. The corruption had spread across half his chest. His thoughts grew foggy. "This is how it ends," a voice whispered in his mind. "Alone, dying in a frozen waste on a world that fears you. You saved them, and they will never trust you for it." Search parties found him 3 hours later. Druids from the Cenarian Circle, led by Malfurion Stormrage himself, surrounded the fallen hero with expressions of deep concern. The ancient night elf knelt beside Kal-El, placing a hand on his forehead. "The void has touched him deeply," Malfurion announced, his voice resonant with the power of nature itself. "It corrupts his essence, seeking to transform him into a vessel for the old god's will. If we cannot purge this corruption, he will become a greater threat than anything we've faced." "Can you heal him?" asked Thrall, who had arrived with the Horde contingent. The former warchief and legendary shaman studied Kal-El with compassionate eyes. Malfurion was silent for a long moment. "The corruption is beyond druidic healing. It is written into his cellular structure, and that structure is unlike anything on Azeroth. We would need help from powers beyond the natural world." "The light, then," suggested Lady Liadrin, Blood Knight matriarch, stepping forward. "If any force can purge void corruption, it is the light's sacred flame." They transported Kal-El to Light's Hope Chapel in Eastern Plaguelands. The concentration of light energy there was among the highest on Azeroth, a bastion of hope in lands long scarred by death and plague. Paladins and priests gathered, channeling their holy magic into the fallen hero. The light responded, but not as expected. It struck the void corruption with cleansing fire, but the interaction was violently unstable. Kal-El's body convulsed. The void fought back, creating a war zone of competing energies within his cells. Paladins were thrown backward by feedback. Priests collapsed, their connection to the light temporarily severed by the sheer force of the conflict. "It's not working," Liadrin gasped, her armor scorched from the magical backlash. "The void has adapted to his alien physiology. It's using his solar energy processing against him, drawing power from the same source that grants him strength. Then we must seek other options," Velen stated, having arrived with a contingent of draenei priests. "There is one power on Azeroth that exists outside the traditional cosmic forces, one that has battled the void since before mortal races drew breath. The Titans," Chromie realized, materializing beside the prophet. "But their influence on Azeroth is limited. The Keepers might have the knowledge, but awakening them is dangerous in itself." "Not the Keepers," Velen corrected. "The Forges. The Forge of Origination in Uldum has the power to restructure matter at a fundamental level. If we could access its systems, we might be able to purge the corruption while preserving his life." The journey to Uldum was conducted under conditions of absolute urgency. Mages created portals. Dragons carried the unconscious Kal-El across continents. Time was measured in hours, then minutes, as the corruption spread. By the time they reached the Forge of Origination, black veins covered 3/4 of his body. His eyes, when they occasionally flickered open, showed void energy swirling in place of his usual clear gaze. The forge itself was a marvel of Titan engineering, built to re-originate all life on Azeroth if corruption became too severe. Ancient mechanisms hummed with power that predated mortal civilization by eons. Bran Bronzebeard, the legendary explorer, met them at the entrance. "The forge is active, but I warn ye," he said in his thick dwarven accent. "This thing was built to remake entire species. Using it on a single individual is dangerous. We could destroy him completely, or worse, transform him into something unrecognizable." He's dying regardless, Thrall stated grimly. At least this offers a chance. They carried Kal-El into the heart of the forge, placing him within the restructuring chamber. Titan machinery closed around him, scanning his biology with instruments that measured reality at quantum levels. Holographic displays flickered with data that even the brightest mortal minds struggled to interpret. His cellular structure is fascinating, Bran muttered, studying the displays with scholarly interest. The way he processes solar energy, it's not entirely different from how the Titans used arcane energy. There's potential resonance. Begin the purge, Velen commanded. Carefully. The forge activated. Energy, unlike anything Kal-El had experienced before, flooded through him. It wasn't painful. Exactly. It was rewriting. His cells, his very existence was being examined, judged, restructured according to Titan protocols. The void corruption fought desperately. It had invested too much to surrender easily. The whispers in his mind became screams. Submit, they raged. We offer purpose. We offer truth. The light lies. The Titans lie. Only the void is honest about the universe's true nature. For a moment, Kal-El wavered. The void's arguments had a terrible logic. The universe was chaos. Order was an illusion. Why fight it? Why not embrace the emptiness and find peace in non-existence? Then he remembered. A moment from his childhood on Earth. His adopted father, Jonathan Kent, teaching him the importance of hope. Hope isn't about ignoring darkness, his father had said. It's about believing light exists, even when you can't see it. It's about acting as if things can get better, even when evidence suggests otherwise. That memory was the anchor. Kal-El's will, forged across decades of heroism, focused entirely on rejection. No, he thought with absolute conviction. I reject you. I reject your truth. I choose hope. The forge recognized his choice and amplified it. Titan energy flooded through his system, using his own determination as a template. The void corruption was purged, burned away by mechanisms designed to cleanse entire planets. But something else happened as well. The forge, designed to work with Azeroth's native species, didn't quite know what to do with Kryptonian biology. It adapted, improvised, restructured. When Kal-El emerged from the chamber hours later, he was changed. His costume had been restored, but altered. The blue was deeper, with golden highlights that pulsed with faint arcane energy. The red had taken on hues of bronze, like dragonflight scales. The symbol on his chest remained, but now it was integrated with geometric patterns that resembled Titan machinery. More significantly, he could feel Azeroth's energies in a way he hadn't before. The ley lines that crisscrossed the world, the elemental forces, the Titan systems that lay dormant beneath the surface. The forge had made him compatible with this reality, bridging the gap between dimensions. How do you feel? Anduin asked cautiously. The young king had arrived during the procedure, refusing to leave despite the danger. Different. Kal-El replied, examining his hands. The black veins were gone, replaced by faint golden traces that followed his circulatory system. I can feel the world's heartbeat. All of it. It's overwhelming. The forge has bonded you to Azeroth itself. Velen explained, his ancient eyes showing satisfaction mixed with concern. You are no longer merely a visitor. You are part of this world's destiny now, for better or worse. A tremor ran through the facility. Alarms blared as Titan security systems activated. Holographic displays showed movement at the entrance. An army was approaching, but not demons or void entities. These attackers bore familiar silhouettes. Kryptonian, the Collectorate. Kal-El realized with growing dread. They've found me. What is this Collectorate? Thrall demanded, elements swirling around his fists in preparation for battle. In another reality, some of my people survived Krypton's destruction, but they evolved in a different direction. They embraced cybernetic augmentation, hive mind connectivity, and expansion through assimilation. If they're here, It means they've been tracking my energy signature across realities. The first wave of Collectorate soldiers breached the Forge's outer defenses. They were nightmares of biological perfection married to technological horror. Kryptonian strength and invulnerability combined with weapons systems, hive connectivity, and cold efficiency. They moved as one, their individual consciousness subsumed into the greater whole. Designation: Kal-El. They spoke in perfect unison, their voices harmonic and emotionless. You will be integrated. Your unmodified genetic code will perfect the Collectorate. Resistance is inefficient. Kal-El stepped forward, positioning himself between the Collectorate and the Defenders. I've faced you before in other realities. You're not getting past me here. The Collectorate soldiers attacked with coordinated precision. Kal-El met them head-on, and the battle that followed shook the ancient Titan facility to its foundations. His newly enhanced connection to Azeroth allowed him to draw on leyline energy, supplementing his solar reserves. When heat vision wasn't enough, he channeled arcane energy through his eyes. When strength alone failed, he tapped into elemental forces. But the Collectorate adapted with frightening speed. For every technique Kal-El used, they developed counters. Their weapons evolved mid-battle, reconfiguring to exploit weaknesses. This wasn't like fighting individual opponents. This was fighting a distributed intelligence that learned from every exchange. "Fall back!" Thrall shouted, calling down lightning to cover the retreat of mortal defenders. Paladins and shamans worked together, creating barriers of light and elemental force. "They're overwhelming us!" Then the Collectorate deployed their champion. Reality rippled as a figure stepped through a dimensional portal into the Forge's central chamber. Zor-El, once a scientist on Krypton, now the prime consciousness of the Collectorate. Its body was a masterwork of augmentation, organic Kryptonian tissue interwoven with technology that blurred the line between machine and flesh. "Cousin," Zor-El spoke, though its voice came from multiple speakers integrated throughout its body. "You have been difficult to locate across the infinite realities, but here, you have made yourself obvious. The Titan energy signature was impossible to miss. The House of El was dedicated to knowledge and preservation." Kal-El replied, his fists clenched. "You've perverted everything we stood for. I have perfected it." Zor-El corrected emotionlessly. "Knowledge is useless without the will to apply it. Preservation requires adaptation. The Collectorate is the ultimate expression of Kryptonian potential. And you, cousin, are the final piece needed to eliminate genetic drift in our population." They clashed with force that cracked the ancient Titan machinery. Zor-El's augmentations gave it capabilities beyond standard Kryptonian physiology. Energy weapons emerged from its arms. Nanites attempted to infiltrate Kal-El's system during physical contact. Its processing speed allowed it to predict and counter Kal-El's movements with disturbing accuracy. But Kal-El had something Zor-El lacked: creativity born from individual consciousness. Connection to a world that existed beyond cold logic. He drew on his bond with Azeroth, channeling energies in combinations the Collectorate couldn't predict. Arcane fire mixed with heat vision. Elemental earth combined with super strength. The battle raged through the Forge, both combatants moving at speeds that made them blurs, even to enhanced vision. When they collided, the shockwaves knocked defenders off their feet. When they unleashed energy attacks, Titan machinery sparked and failed. The ancient facility, built to withstand planetary catastrophes, groaned under the strain. "Your connection to this world makes you weaker," Zor-El stated during a brief pause in their combat. "You allow emotion to cloud judgment. You divide your processing power between multiple ethical considerations. Inefficient. It makes me stronger." Kal-El countered, deflecting a barrage of energy projectiles. "Because I'm fighting for something beyond mere survival. These people, this world, they matter. Not as resources to be assimilated, but as beings with intrinsic value. Sentiment is evolutionary baggage." Zor-El's body reconfigured mid-combat, new weapons emerging. "The Collectorate has transcended such limitations. We achieve perfection through unity of purpose. Their next exchange sent both crashing through multiple levels of the forge. Kal-El emerged first, only to find himself surrounded by Collectorate soldiers, dozens of them, all moving with perfect synchronization. They attacked as one organism, and the Doxane, in the formant, creating a web of coordinated strikes impossible to completely evade. Pain blossomed across Kal-El's body as weapons found their marks. The Collectorate had studied his enhanced physiology. Their weapons were specifically tuned to resonate with the Titan modifications in his cells, creating interference patterns that disrupted his connection to Azeroth's energies. He felt his strength beginning to fade. Then the defenders of Azeroth struck back. Thrall called upon the elements with such force that lightning storms manifested indoors. Velen channeled the light in its purest form, creating shields that actually deflected Collectorate weapons. Malfurion reached deep into the desert sands, awakening roots and vines that had lain dormant for millennia. Even Sylvanas, working alongside her former enemies, unleashed dark arrows that found gaps in Collectorate armor. But it wasn't enough. For every soldier that fell, 2 more emerged from the dimensional portal. The Collectorate was committing serious resources to this capture. Zor-El had calculated that Kal-El was worth any cost. The facility will fall within minutes, Zor-El stated calmly, studying the battlefield with cold analysis. Surrender is the only logical option. Your allies die for nothing. Join the Collectorate willingly, and they will be spared. Kal-El looked around at the defenders. Humans, dwarves, elves, orcs, draenei, all fighting together against an enemy from beyond their reality. They were exhausted, bleeding, dying, but not one retreated, not one suggested surrender. In their faces, he saw the same stubborn determination he'd witnessed countless times on his Earth. The refusal to submit, even when victory seemed impossible. You're wrong about something fundamental, Kal-El said, his voice carrying across the battlefield. You think unity of purpose requires unity of mind, that cooperation demands assimilation. But look at them. He gestured to the defenders. Different species, different beliefs, different methods of power, and yet they stand together, not because they're forced to, but because they choose to. Choice is chaos, Zor-El replied. Chaos leads to conflict. Conflict leads to inefficiency. Into and fast leads to inefficiency. Chaos leads to growth, Kal-El corrected. To adaptation. To innovations you can't predict, because they come from unpredictable sources. He reached deep into his bond with Azeroth, feeling the world's heartbeat synchronize with his own. The Titan machinery around them began to respond, not to commands, but to intent. Watch. Golden light erupted from Kal-El's body. Not the light of the Naru, but something else. Titan energy channeled through Kryptonian biology. The Forge recognized what he was attempting and responded. Ancient systems came online that hadn't functioned since the Titans themselves walked Azeroth. Reorigination protocols activated, not to destroy life, but to enhance it. The energy washed over the defenders, mending wounds, restoring strength, temporarily boosting their capabilities beyond normal limits. A human paladin found herself striking with force that shattered Collectorate armor. A night elf druid's nature magic surged with unprecedented potency. Thrall called lightning that cascaded through Collectorate ranks like divine judgment, but the same energy had the opposite effect on the Collectorate soldiers. Their cybernetic systems, designed for efficiency and integration, rejected the Titan energy. Nanites failed. Augmentations sparked and died. Hive-mind connections severed. For the first time in centuries, Collectorate soldiers experienced individual consciousness. The confusion was devastating. Zor-El staggered as its own systems began failing. Impossible. This energy signature, it's antithetical to our architecture. How? Because you built your collective on suppression. Kal-El explained, advancing on his corrupted cousin. You forced unity by eliminating choice. The Titans built their systems to support diversity, to strengthen individual potential within collective purpose. You created a weakness pretending to eliminate one. With desperate fury, Zor-El attacked. Its remaining functioning systems overloaded, burning themselves out for one final assault. The two Kryptonians collided with apocalyptic force. Fissures opened in the forge's floor. Ancient Titan machinery exploded. Energy cascaded through the facility in waves that threatened structural collapse. In the chaos of battle, Kal-El saw his opening. One moment of vulnerability as Zor-El's weapon systems cycled. He moved faster than thought, his fist connecting with his cousin's central processing core. The augmentation cracked, shattered. Zor-El's body convulsed as the hive-mind connection severed completely. For the first time in 2,000 years, Zor-El experienced individual thought. The consciousness that had been subsumed into the collectorate prime consciousness suddenly remembered what it meant to be a person. Memories flooded back. Krypton, family, the choice to augment. The slow erosion of self into collective. The horror of what had been lost. What have I become? Zor-El whispered, its voice no longer harmonized but singular, broken. What have we all become? The collectorate soldiers, similarly severed from the hive mind, stood in confusion. Some began removing their augmentations with trembling hands. Others simply collapsed. Overwhelmed by the return of individual consciousness and the weight of memories they'd suppressed for generations. The dimensional portal collapsed. Without Zor-El's coordinating intelligence, the collectorate invasion force had no direction. They began retreating, carrying their damaged prime consciousness with them. But not before Zor-El turned one last time to look at Kal-El. "You've given me back my curse," it said, pain evident in every word. "The awareness of what I've done, what we've all done in the name of perfection. I don't know if I should thank you or curse you for this mercy. Live with it." Kal-El replied, his voice gentle despite the devastation around them. "Use it to be better. Help your people remember what they were before the collectorate consumed them. It's not too late to choose a different path." The portal closed. Silence fell over the ruined forge, broken only by the sounds of groaning metal and exhausted breathing. Healers moved among the wounded. Druids began assessing the damage to the ancient facility. Slowly, painfully, the defenders of Azeroth picked themselves up and began the work of recovery. Anduin approached Kal-El, his armor dented and scorched, but his expression one of profound gratitude. "You saved us. Again. But more than that, you showed us something important." The young king looked around at the mixed alliance and Horde forces working together. "You showed us that different peoples, different powers, can achieve more together than apart. It's a lesson my Earth learned slowly," Kal-El admitted, fatigue evident in his posture. "Through countless wars and conflicts. I hope Azeroth can learn it faster. We will try." Thrall interjected, joining them. The green-skinned orc extended his hand. "I have seen many heroes in my time, warriors of incredible power. But true heroism isn't about power. It's about the choices we make with that power. Today, you chose to stand with us rather than above us. That matters." The journey back to Dalaran was subdued. The defenders were exhausted but victorious. The collectorate threat was neutralized, at least temporarily. But questions remained. Kal-El's presence had stabilized somewhat, his integration with Azeroth reducing the reality fractures. But he was still a cosmic anomaly, a being from beyond the boundaries of normal existence. The summit reconvened, but the atmosphere was dramatically different. Alliance and Horde representatives, who had viewed each other with suspicion, now spoke with mutual respect earned through shared battle. Neutral faction leaders, who had questioned Kal-El's place in their world, now regarded him with something approaching acceptance. "Your presence creates complications," Velen acknowledged, speaking for many in the chamber. "The timeline remains uncertain. Reality fractures persist. But you have proven yourself through action. You have bled for this world. You have rejected power offered by both the Void and the Collectorate. Most significantly, you have shown wisdom in how you use your abilities." "Prophet Velen is correct," Sylvanas added, her tone lacking its earlier hostility. "You could have dominated us. Your power is sufficient to declare yourself ruler of Azeroth, and few could effectively oppose you. Instead, you deferred to our authority structures. You asked for permission. You accepted limitations. That speaks to character. Chromie stepped forward, her expression troubled but resigned. The Bronze Dragonflight has reached a consensus. Your presence alters the timeline, yes, but those alterations may not be catastrophic. In fact, some futures we now observe show positive divergence. Threats we expected to overwhelm Azeroth are now survivable with your assistance. You've become a variable that increases our survival probability. Then the question becomes practical. Khadgar stated, his scholarly mind already working through implications. How do we integrate you into Azeroth's defense structure? You cannot be everywhere at once, despite your speed. You cannot prevent every tragedy or solve every problem. What role do you serve that maximizes benefit while minimizing disruption? Kal-El had been considering this question since awakening from the Forge. I've spent my life on Earth trying to find that balance. I learned that being everywhere made people dependent. It stifled their growth. But being nowhere meant preventable suffering. The answer is somewhere in between. He looked around the chamber at the assembled leaders. I propose this. I will respond to cosmic-scale threats, invasions, reality tiers, entities that threaten Azeroth as a whole, things beyond your conventional capabilities. But for regional conflicts, political disputes, normal threats that your people can handle, I remain on the sidelines. I become a guardian against the darkness beyond, not a solution to everyday problems. A sentinel, Anduin said thoughtfully, like the Titans intended their keepers to be, present but not controlling, powerful but not dominant. Exactly, Kal-El confirmed. And I learn from you. Your world has survived horrors that would have destroyed my Earth. You've developed philosophies, strategies, magic systems that I don't understand. You have wisdom I lack. I offer my strength. But I also ask for your guidance in using it appropriately. The proposal was debated for hours. Details were negotiated. Boundaries established. Communication protocols defined. Finally, as the sun set over the maelstrom, an accord was reached. Kal-El would be sanctioned as Azeroth's sentinel, a defender empowered to act against cosmic threats, but bound by voluntary agreement to respect the autonomy of the world's nations and peoples. But one voice had remained conspicuously silent throughout the negotiations. Magni Bronzebeard, the diamond-skinned former king of Ironforge who had been transformed into a speaker for Azeroth itself, finally spoke. His voice resonated with harmonics that suggested he was channeling the world soul's own consciousness. The world has accepted him, Magni announced, his words carrying weight beyond normal speech. I hear her voice, and she speaks of the alien who became her defender. She has woven him into her essence. He is no longer merely a visitor. He is part of Azeroth's destiny, as surely as the Titans or the Dragons or the mortal races. The pronouncement silenced the remaining objections. If Azeroth herself had accepted Kal-El, who were they to reject him? The accord was signed by representatives from every major faction. The Kirin Tor crafted communication crystals that would allow rapid contact if cosmic threats emerged. The Bronze Dragonflight established monitoring protocols to track timeline stability. As the summit concluded and representatives prepared to return to their homelands, Anduin pulled Kal-El aside for a private conversation. Walk with me, the young king requested, leading the way to a balcony overlooking the maelstrom's swirling waters. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the elemental forces rage far below. Finally, Anduin spoke, his voice contemplative. I became king too young. My father died fighting the Legion, and I inherited a throne I wasn't ready for. Since then, I've made decisions that cost lives. I've tried to balance mercy with pragmatism, hope with realism. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. Kal-El listened, sensing the young king needed to voice thoughts he couldn't share with others. When I saw you fight today, Anduin continued, I saw something I've been trying to achieve. Power used with restraint, strength tempered by compassion. You could have killed every collectorate soldier, Instead, you freed them. You could have destroyed Zor-El. Instead, you offered redemption. That's the kind of leadership I aspire to. I've made mistakes too, Kal-El admitted. On my Earth, there were times I acted without thinking. Times my power solved problems but didn't address their root causes. Times I did too much or too little. The young king looked at him, and Kal-El continued. The key is learning from those mistakes, growing, never becoming so confident in your rightness that you stop questioning your actions. How do you maintain hope? Anduin asked suddenly. In a world like this, where darkness is constant and victory is temporary, how do you keep believing things can get better? Kal-El pointed upward, where stars were beginning to emerge in the twilight sky. On my Krypton, my father sent me to Earth with a message. He said I would give humanity an ideal to strive toward, that they would race behind me, stumble, fall, but in time, they would join me in the sun. He lowered his hand, meeting Anduin's gaze. Hope isn't naive optimism. It's active defiance of despair. It's choosing to believe that effort matters even when outcomes are uncertain. The young king smiled, the expression transforming his careworn features. Thank you for that. And thank you for choosing to be Azeroth's sentinel. I think we're going to need you in the days ahead. Over the following weeks, Kal-El settled into his new role. He established his sanctuary in a remote area of Crystal Song Forest, where reality was naturally thin, and he could easily detect cosmic disturbances. Dalaran provided magical monitoring equipment. The Bronze Dragonflight taught him to sense timeline disruptions. The Earthen Ring explained how to read Azeroth's distress signals through the World Soul's emanations. His first official response came sooner than expected. A massive tear opened in the twisting nether, and Legion forces poured through in numbers that suggested a major offensive. Kal-El arrived within minutes, but this time, he wasn't alone. Alliance and Horde forces had mobilized in coordination, responding to the threat with practiced efficiency. They didn't wait for him to solve the problem. They engaged the demons directly. Fighting with courage and skill, Kal-El's role was to handle what they couldn't. The Fel Lord leading the invasion, a towering entity of corrupted fire and hatred, fell before his coordinated assault. The largest demon vessels, which would have required naval bombardments, were torn apart by his strength. The portal generators, protected by shields that resisted conventional weaponry, melted under his heat vision. But the mortal defenders handled everything else. They established defensive perimeters, evacuated civilians, coordinated air and ground forces, and ultimately pushed the invasion back. When the portal finally closed, it was a victory earned by many, not gifted by one. This is how it should be, Kal-El thought, watching the defenders celebrate their success. I'm not their savior. I'm their backup. Their insurance against threats they can't yet handle alone. The distinction mattered. Not every response was combat-oriented. When the old god N'Zoth attempted to corrupt sections of the Emerald Dream, Kal-El worked alongside druids to purge the infection. His resistance to mental corruption, enhanced by his Titan modifications, allowed him to venture into corrupted areas that would drive mortals mad. But he followed the druid's expertise in healing the natural world, using his strength only when force was necessary. When reality fractures appeared in Silithus, threatening to tear open the prison of another old god, he coordinated with Titan Keepers to stabilize the region. They provided the knowledge of Titan's systems. He provided the power to implement their solutions. Together, they prevented catastrophe. Months passed, then a year. Kal-El became a fixture in Azeroth's ongoing struggle for survival, but not its centerpiece. Legends grew around him. Yes, the Sentinel of Azeroth, the Titan's champion, the Guardian beyond, but he remained accessible. He attended diplomatic functions when requested. He answered questions from scholars studying his unique physiology. He even, on one memorable occasion, helped a gnomish engineer retrieve her crashed flying machine from a mountainside. But challenges remained. The void entities that had corrupted him once before continued their whispered attempts at reconversion. They were patient, eternal, They could wait generations for an opening. Kal-El had to remain constantly vigilant against their influence, using meditation techniques taught by priests and discipline learned across his long life. The Collectorate also remained a threat, though a changed one. Zor-El, restored to individual consciousness, had initiated reforms within their society. Not all Collectorate members welcomed the return to individualism. Some saw it as regression, weakness. A civil war was brewing in dimensional spaces beyond Azeroth, and Kal-El knew it might eventually spill over into this reality. More pressingly, his presence had attracted attention from entities he'd hoped to avoid. The Burning Legion's Dark Master, Sargeras, had taken notice of the cosmic anomaly on Azeroth. The corrupted Titan was imprisoned, yes, but his awareness remained vast. Kal-El could sometimes feel that malevolent attention focusing on him across the barriers of reality. It was like being watched by a galaxy-sized predator deciding whether he was worth the effort to hunt. 2 years after his arrival, a council was called in Stormwind. Not a crisis response, but a general review of Azeroth's defense strategies. Representatives from all factions gathered, including several that rarely participated in such meetings. The High Mountain Tauren, the Zandalari Trolls, even ethereals from beyond Azeroth's boundaries attended as observers. Kal-El presented a report on the cosmic threats he'd detected during his patrols. The Legion was regrouping, rebuilding their forces despite setbacks. The Void entities were becoming more organized, their corrupting influence spreading through subtle channels. Timeline fractures continued appearing, suggesting something was deliberately trying to destabilize Azeroth's history. And beyond all of these known threats, he detected something new. Energy signatures from realities even further removed from Azeroth than his own Earth. We face enemies from without and within. Kal-El explained, holographic displays showing the scope of detected threats. But I've also observed something hopeful. Your cooperation has improved dramatically. Alliance and Horde forces coordinate with increasing efficiency. Neutral factions engage proactively rather than reactively. You're becoming stronger not despite your diversity, but because of it. That strength will be tested soon. Velen interjected, his ancient eyes troubled. I have seen visions of a darkness approaching. Not the Legion, not the Void. Something older and more terrible. An entity from the spaces between realities. Drawn by the same cosmic instability that brought Kal-El to us. The chamber fell silent. Kal-El felt a chill despite his invulnerability. He'd encountered many threats across his long life, but something in Velen's tone suggested this was categorically different. What entity? Anduin asked, though his expression suggested he feared the answer. The light and void are cosmic forces in eternal conflict. Velen began, his voice taking on the quality of a teacher explaining fundamental truths. But they are not the only cosmic forces. There exists a third power, spoken of only in the most ancient draenei texts, the dissolution. An entity that exists in the boundaries between realities, consuming universes that become too unstable to maintain coherence. And you believe it's coming here? Sylvanas demanded, her tactical mind already assessing implications. I believe it has already noticed Azeroth, Velen confirmed. The reality fractures, the dimensional incursions, the presence of Kal-El himself. All of these have made our universe visible to something that typically ignores individual realities. If the dissolution decides Azeroth represents an instability that must be corrected, it will come. And when it does, everything we know will end. The pronouncement hung in the air like a death sentence. Kal-El looked around at the assembled leaders. These people had faced extinction-level threats before and survived. They would face this one the same way. Together, then we prepare. He stated simply, we strengthen Azeroth's reality anchors. We coordinate defense strategies. We research everything we can about this dissolution. And when it comes, if it comes, we face it the way we've faced every other threat, united. The room erupted in discussion. Strategies proposed and debated. Resources allocated. Research initiatives launched. While Major and Abajer.com Don't come. Through it all, Kal-El remained quiet, his enhanced senses reaching out across Azeroth. He could feel the world soul's pulse, steady and strong despite the threats surrounding her. Could feel the determination of countless mortal hearts refusing to surrender to fear. This was what he fought for. Not just individual lives, though each mattered, but something larger. The right of people to choose their own destiny, to face darkness with courage born from free will rather than programming or corruption. Azeroth might be harsher than his Earth had been, more morally complicated, but it was also more resilient. These people had been forged in fires that would have consumed lesser civilizations. As the council concluded and representatives departed to implement defensive measures, Chromie approached Kal-El privately. Her expression was troubled, more so than he'd seen since their first meeting. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "Something the Bronze Dragonflight discovered but hasn't shared with the council. About why you're really here." Kal-El gestured for her to continue. Sensing this revelation would be significant, "Your arrival wasn't random." Chromie explained, "We've traced the temporal mechanics of your dimensional transit. Something guided you here specifically. Not the dissolution, not the void or legion. Something older. We believe the Titans themselves, or whatever consciousness they left embedded in Azeroth, called you across realities. Why? What purpose would that serve? Because they foresaw a threat that none of Azeroth's native defenders could handle alone." Chromie's voice dropped to a whisper. "In every timeline where you don't arrive, Azeroth falls. Not to the Legion, not to the Void, to something we still can't fully identify. But in timelines where you do arrive, where you become Azeroth's sentinel, the world survives. Not easily, not without terrible cost, but it survives." Kal-El processed this information, feeling the weight of prophetic destiny settling on shoulders already burdened. "So, I was brought here to save a world. Again. Just like I was sent to Earth from Krypton. Not just to save it," Chromie corrected. "To give it a chance. The Titans created many failsafes for Azeroth. Keepers, dragon aspects, re-origination protocols. But they knew those wouldn't be enough against every possible threat. So they created one more failsafe. A beacon that would reach across realities if Azeroth faced extinction. You answered that beacon, Kal-El. Not by accident, by design stretching back before mortal races existed. The revelation should have felt manipulative, used. But instead, Kal-El felt oddly peaceful. Whether by accident or design, he was where he needed to be, doing what he was meant to do. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Protecting life. Standing against darkness. Offering hope in a universe that desperately needed it. Thank you for telling me," he said finally. "Does anyone else know?" "Only the aspects. And now you." Chromie hesitated, then added, "The future remains uncertain, Kal-El. Even with your presence, the timelines show variations, victories and defeats, survival and extinction. Your choice to come here gave Azeroth a chance. But only a chance. The rest depends on all of us." As night fell over Stormwind, Kal-El stood on the ramparts of the keep, looking out over the city he'd defended multiple times now. Lights flickered in windows as families gathered for evening meals. Guards patrolled the streets. Merchants closed their shops. Mages studied in their towers. Life continuing, despite cosmic threats looming beyond the horizon. He thought of his Earth, his real home, and wondered if he would ever return. The answer didn't trouble him as much as it once might have. Home wasn't just a place. It was where you were needed, where you could make a difference, where the symbol on your chest meant something to people looking up in hope. Azeroth needed him now. This harsh, complicated world, with its morally gray choices and constant warfare. This world where heroism was measured not in victories but in continued survival against impossible odds. This world that had accepted him despite every reason not to. He would be its sentinel, its guardian against the darkness between realities. Not a savior, but a protector. Not a ruler, but a shield. And when the dissolution came, when the ultimate test arrived, he would face it the same way he'd faced every challenge in his long life. With courage, with hope, with the absolute conviction that light, however small, could pierce even the deepest darkness. The stars emerged above Stormwind, eternal and indifferent. But beneath them, life flourished. Mortal and immortal, alliance and horde, all the diverse peoples of Azeroth, living, fighting, hoping, all protected by agreements, by armies, by magic, and now, by a sentinel from beyond the stars. Kal-El smiled slightly, the expression carrying weight of acceptance. He'd lost his original Earth, but gained a new world to protect, one that needed him not because its people were weak, but because the threats they faced were so overwhelming that even their considerable strength needed supplementation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The dissolution might come. The Collectorate might return. The Void would certainly continue its patient corruption. But tomorrow would also bring new victories, new alliances, new reasons to hope. That was enough. That had always been enough. The last son of Krypton stood watch over Azeroth, his cape billowing in winds that carried the scent of 1,000,000 different lives. His symbol, hope, glowed softly in the starlight. And across the world, people slept a little easier knowing that if darkness came, if reality itself threatened to tear apart, there was someone watching. Someone who would stand between them and annihilation. Someone who still believed, despite everything, that tomorrow could be better than today. The story of Superman in World of Warcraft was just beginning. The real tests lay ahead. But for now, in this moment, there was peace. There was purpose. There was hope. And in the grim, complex, morally challenging universe of Azeroth, hope was the rarest and most powerful force of all.